Hello, friends. Uncle Marv here with another episode of the IT Business Podcast, the show for IT professionals and managed service providers to help us run our businesses better, smarter, and faster. Today, folks, is a show that I promised you where we are going to answer a listener email, but it is going to be a multi-show answer. I've got a few different MSPs that I've asked to come on and address this topic of zero trust. And tonight I have with me Raffi Jamgachian, Triada Networks out of the Great White North. Raffi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you, Uncle Marv?
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. So last week I brought up this listener email. It actually came in right before the holidays, so it wasn't something that I was going to get into at the end of last year, but I wanted to make sure I got to it. And Landon had sent in the email. And I'll just quickly recap where he said, with all the platforms out there, incorporating zero trust into your stack seems to be more of an operations question than a technical or security question. A service like ThreatLocker is almost custom designed for an MSP that wants zero trust, EDR, and everything in one package that's highly centralized and treats the OS environments more like a thin client than a traditional solution. I'm going to skip over part of that. I had responded to him and asked him a little bit more of a clarification because he started talking about the stuff that he did where they were doing MDM, Microsoft Intune, and stuff like that. But the crux of his question came into, for an MSP that is already doing MDM and PAM, that opens up questions like, is zero trust even necessary for my operations? What are the pros and cons if I do implement zero trust? And then, of course, some additional questions. What is the benefit of zero trust if I'm already doing PAM? Is there even a measurable security benefit to be had in such a case? So it's a lot of questions all at once. And so, Raffi, I was poking around trying to find who am I going to ask to discuss this, and I saw a post that you had done in one of the forums where you answered with a very intriguing answer, basically with the sense of zero trust means that for everything, including our tools and providers. And that was answering somebody else's question about how, should we ask more of our RMM to be more like zero trust? So let me start by asking, do you remember that conversation?
I do, and it was we had started kind of towing into the zero trust kind of concepts and what have you, and the way I was thinking around it was kind of so what is zero trust? Zero trust is really kind of a mindset or set of philosophy, if you want to call it that, if you start from the core of it, about not trusting anything to start with. So it's you think about, some people say assume breach, other people say don't trust, you have least privilege. There are all these terms that kind of all blend into what this idea about zero trust is. And so we think of it kind of like as a starting point from whatever it is that we're talking about. So that includes our vendors.
Okay. And
so when we think about, for example, we run some pretty highly privileged applications around our businesses and our clients' businesses, RMM, MDM being two of them. Certainly our EDR systems have fairly high privileges. Most of them on Windows, at least, are running in the kernel, and Mac, they're running at a layer above that. And then also the activities that that the vendors bring, those risks that the vendors bring in with those tools as well. And so, so in kind of thinking around what is that, not trusting anything, just allowing it to do the thing that it can do, that it should do, is really the idea. And whether or not that's just the app or the vendor or the person or the location, all those things are part of zero trust, at least how I've thought about it and how, at least in the early days, people were thinking about it.
Yeah, I had to catch myself because I'm sure, like a lot of MSPs, I at one point thought, well, zero trust, I'll just throw on ThreatLocker and I'll be good. And in doing a little bit of research for this, I came across a NIST document, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes. And I'm sure most of you have probably heard of it. If you have not, then you need to take a look. It is the NIST 800-207. They now have a revision 3, and it talks all about the zero trust architecture. And it gives you a pretty good framework for, a blueprint. It is vendor agnostic, but their mantra was never trust, always verify.
Right.
And I like that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to start from an extreme and work your way a little bit backwards. That's the idea. It's right. It's the same thing as when you think about firewalls. When you think about firewalls, are you allowing everything and then just blocking the things that you don't want? Or are you not allowing anything and just allowing the things that you do want? It's the same concept across all things, whether that's identity, your device, other information, location, all those things. So,
right.
Yeah. So we've ThreatLocker is a piece of it. It's certainly a piece that we use across from an application allow listing. They have other solutions too on the network stack, but there's other solutions there too for doing microsegmentation or think about, VLANs up until in the MSP world wasn't really even talked about other than some basic stuff, a guest network, maybe something for a specific, R&D network that you have for your clients, they have a lab, VoIP. But you're getting that even tighter, even smaller.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one way.
So there was something you brought up when you talked about, all the different ways to look at it. So part of me always looked at it from the perimeter, like you had talked about with the firewalls. You just basically don't open any ports, including remote access. So secure remote access, or in some cases, SASE, ZTNA was the solution. And so for me, that was a big thing. ThreatLocker for internal, making sure that, nobody can even install something unless it's on the list.
Even if they're privileged, they still can't install it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember, it probably still happens, but nobody's watching. But there were times when I would be installing something for somebody, they'd be watching, and I'd go to hit click and they're like, oh, you can't install it either. I'm like, no, that's what we want. And it was a big deal.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little story. This is going back, let's call it 6-7 years ago. Was it that long ago? Yeah, probably about 6-7 years ago. So we were using an EDR vendor that we will not name. We had it deployed across our client base. We had recently set up. It was a new client. It was not in our local footprint, so a little bit further away, about 4 hours away. And we had replaced their firewalls, so new firewalls, but we had not replaced their VPN appliance. They had a separate VPN appliance. And we missed something. We missed a setting on that VPN appliance that was there from the previous MSP that allowed somebody to log in with an account without MFA. So even though MFA was set up, they were using Duo, and even though MFA was set up, some reason they had created a rule that said that if you did something, it would bypass the MFA and then still allow you in. So it was kind of a dumb setup, but we missed it. So, we're PAX on us. An attacker who phished at one of the employees was able to get in. At that point, this is COVID, so the only device on the network was one desktop that was in a conference room. Everybody else had taken their laptops home. So they logged into that desktop, and they started trying to dump credentials. And we had implemented ThreatLocker. So nothing was happening. The first thing that was allowed on the allowed list, because we had allowed it by our RMM. It was an RMM tool. They used the RMM tool to try to dump credentials, and then our EDR picked it up. So this is why you do both these things. You don't just pick one or the other. Is because one is going to tell you when there's a nasty behavior, and then the other one is going to prevent everything else from getting to that point. And so you can't just rely on one. Again, in this case, it was like we trusted the RMM a little bit too much, more than we should have, and that's where the EDR picked up. So, and then obviously we decided to go get away with VPNs entirely throughout our client base after that incident. But these are the things that happen. You learn along the way. Why people ask, like, why do you add that additional problem that you have to deal with at your client? That's going to just add noise, and it is noisy. There's ThreatLocker does a good job of trying to encapsulate that and keep the things, make it easier to manage. But it's additional work. It's additional work to get these things secure. That's why you have to charge more.
Yeah. So let me ask this question. You piqued my interest and you said we trusted our RMM too much, because most of us think that, our RMM is an extension of us. Mm-hmm. And if we've got that locked down to the point where maybe we lock down the IPs that it can connect from, maybe, sure, we force MFA for all of our users. Yes. We don't give it to our clients, so they're not using it to, remote to any of their desktops. How are you trusting it too much?
So, and we've done those things too, using a ZTNA to lock down the IP so that only those IPs that come from our ZTNA are allowed to connect to our RMM. In this case, it was an executable that the RMM had that used on Windows, and it was part of their package. So because the RMM was using it, we allowed it. Okay. And in this case, the adversary also used it. So what we should have done was said, okay, if the RMM launches this application, allow it. But if anybody else does, that's what we want to find out about. That's when we want to kind of almost the concept of ring fencing, but at that application layer. Not only is it I'm getting technical here, but the application that you're running, but also who is launching that application or what is that launching that application. We didn't have that as scoped narrowly enough. And that's why that additional thing. But funny enough, if that didn't happen, then we wouldn't have known that somebody was on that system.
Right.
Because the EDR that flipped off, that's when we knew that somebody was on the system, and we were able to then, jettison them.
So do you use, and this just came to me and I'm sure somebody else has thought of it, but I feel pretty good where I'm thinking, do you employ a concept of who, what, when, where, why, and how to zero trust?
Oh, for zero trust?
Yeah. So who's running it? What are they trying to do with it?
Yeah.
When are they running it? Are they running it during the workday? Are they running it at 2 a.m.? Who, what, when, where? Where are they running it from? Why are they running it? Is this a user that even is allowed to run such a thing? And then
it comes into I think when we're investigating, yes.
Okay.
I don't think we don't have it such that like time of day access for certain applications and not other applications, or we do based on some location, but not at like the ThreatLocker level. We will have location based, whether that's conditional access or the ZTNA filtering differently, allowing access differently depending on where they are. The other thing we leverage with, we use where most of our clients are financial services. And so there are three things that financial services clients like really are keen on. One is they're big on single sign-on. And so we leverage using either Azure or Okta to make sure that we know that what device, who the person is, where they're logging in from. And in some cases, there is some time of day in there too, but it's primarily those three. It's device, who, and what.
All right. So what
came? Not all the questions.
Okay, I get you. So that came to mind. I don't know why I thought of that, but it was I thought it was cool. But so.
But it's hard to do all of them.
It is. But it was funny because I did have a situation on Sunday. One of my clients where AJ, I call him, he's an admin junior, works, it's a co-managed location. He sets up all the users and does all this stuff. We use TrueGrid for their remote access for their branch offices. And I remember he sent an email complaining because one of their users couldn't connect to TrueGrid. And when I looked it up, at first I almost didn't respond to him because it was Sunday. But
you still did, Marv.
Well, I had time.
Okay.
And when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, so this is a user, and we use Active Directory. They're still on-prem. They've got some SQL servers and some line of business apps that will not run in the cloud because the vendor won't do it. But they use Active Directory, and they use time restrictions for their employees. So most employees can work Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., not after hours or on the weekends. And this particular user was given permission to work remotely that Monday, but apparently he had them try it on Sunday or over the weekend to get in, and they couldn't get in, and he was freaking out, which is why I finally responded.
Interesting.
And I logged in, and I'm like, you don't allow this person access on the weekends. And he's like, yeah, but why should that matter with TrueGrid? And I was like, TrueGrid talks to Active Directory, and Active Directory says not allowed, but TrueGrid can't give that specific reason.
Right.
But he was like, oh, okay. But it was just one of those things.
Yeah. That's time restricted logins is not something I've seen for a very long time. Interesting.
Yeah, I do a lot of old school things. So
we still have a lot of Active Directory out there. It's still kicking around.
Yeah. So let me at least bring one of these questions in specifically because he talked about the fact that they're using Microsoft Intune. They're doing MDM, which I assume is with a lot of their Mac clients and stuff, although I can see them doing MDM with desktops and stuff.
Sure.
But he says, if I'm already doing MDM and PAM, is zero trust even necessary for my operations, or is it just layered marketing?
I wouldn't say it's layered marketing. The fact that we have a NIST framework means it's not marketing, right? It's now we actually have a guideline that we can go by and say, this is the ultimate, penultimate goal when it comes to a zero trust enforcement. And we're seeing that at, the insurance companies also saying that, do you have a zero trust policy or process or whatever? Are you moving towards that? And again, it's a journey, not a destination, right? But specifically to the question about MDM and PAM, they are policy drivers. They're not necessarily protecting you in real time. Your PAM is to some extent because it's allowing, maybe you're using it for, and then he didn't really say how he's implementing PAM. There's multiple ways. Is it just going to IT Glue to retrieve your admin password in order to log in? Or are they using a proxy to do it? Or are they using just-in-time admin access with Azure? There's lots of ways to implement PAM, and yet these are certainly ways to reduce your attack surface area, and they're smart. But these things aren't mutually exclusive. The MDM is going to apply policy on when should the device be locked, what can it do, what it cannot do, and certainly again reduces attack surface. But that's not to say that is that enough. Only you can say if it's enough or not. It depends on what level of risk that you are willing to tolerate or not tolerate, depending on the kind of client they are and what they're protecting. So very vague response to, I guess, somewhat of a not clear question to me. But for me, I wouldn't rely on just a policy, especially something like Intune with MDM. Half the time, you don't know if it's being applied right or not.
Right.
Do you even know if the policy is in place? Sometimes you have half your devices are out of compliance or not in compliance, but they still function. Or are you going to lock down devices that are not in compliance, which you certainly can with conditional access? So some of that functionality exists there, but it's certainly not a full-blown zero trust environment. Microsoft has a strong blueprint for zero trust purely in a Microsoft setting without anything else. Part of that is application allow listing is in that as well. But their platform is just a pain in the ass to, sorry, can I use that term?
Yeah, you can.
A pain in the ass to put in place. So,
well, funny you should say that, because I am looking at, for lack of a better phrase, lifting a client to the cloud. So they are a small office, and they've got several people that work in the office. They were sharing stuff through their personal OneDrives. They tried to do some internal sharing. I put a Synology box in when I first took them over. I just got them in October. And so now we're looking at, how can we do all of this shared access, because they've got people outside of the office that need access to inside the office, but they don't want to pay for a remote server or workstations to connect to. So we're looking at SharePoint. We're looking at conditional access to not only lock down their M365 accounts, because before I only used it for email. We would just, nobody outside of the U.S. and, you can log in without MFA if you're in the office from this IP address, but everywhere else, MFA, all of that stuff. But I wanted to do one of the wishes that they wanted only certain people to be logged on to SharePoint from certain devices.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get told that, yes, we can do that with devices. But I was looking in there, there's a lot of granularity in terms of what you can do.
Yep.
But you're right, it looks overwhelming in a sense that if there's no real, there's not a global policy that you can create and say, apply this.
Yeah. And besides the complexity, it's still it's a very important piece, conditional access. But it's only one piece of the puzzle. You can do a lot with it, but it's not everything for sure. And then you have the things that if you're a pure Microsoft shop, you're not using anything else, then it's potentially doable with just those tools. You get P2 on Azure, and you can get access to lots of different capabilities there to lock down an environment. But I don't know, there's very few companies that I know that are that pure Microsoft that there's not something else that they're running that you need to also make sure that they're protected.
All right.
And they're going to want to run something else.
Okay. Are you applying zero trust to all your clients regardless of who they are, or only are you doing the high risk clients?
At some level, we are doing something across all clients. So ThreatLocker is a standard for all our clients on the protect and ring fencing.
Okay, everybody, period.
Everybody.
Nice.
Yeah, everybody across thing. Anybody that's on anyone that's in Microsoft shop, we're doing some sort of conditional access. Is everyone on ZTNA? Not yet. We did for a while. We were going down that path. We ran into some issues. We yanked back a little bit. So that's still an area that is, I would say, partial, depending on the customer base, whether we go down that road or not. So we do have some ZTNA in base, but not fully deployed. And then the last piece is, for us is a part of it is the browser, is protecting the browser a little bit, because we think that's kind of the window into everything nowadays. So a little bit different not really a discussion with this topic necessarily with zero trust, but it's something that we look at as well. But those are from the zero trust period. ThreatLocker is definitely a standard across our. There are certain pieces that all clients have. ThreatLocker, our EDR, and on the email side, it'll be something similar.
Okay. When you said browser, so I did a thing a couple of weeks ago. I've got web protection, and on any of the desktop clients, it can also block, or I should say block is the right word, but I can do content filtering and blocking internally as well with the web browser, so that if there's any, if somebody's trying to get to a web portal inside the network, it can be blocked. And I thought it was cool. I'm like, oh, let me see what this does. Only that it blocked a ODBC setting for one of the SQL programs.
Oh boy!
So that is what I think is probably, at least for me, one of the biggest steps is how do you monitor internal? And I know that EDR was supposed to do that. I'll be honest, I've looked at some EDR products and I'm not sure that's what they're doing. They might be looking at stuff. But are you doing a lot of internal traverse watching?
Certainly with the ZTNA-based clients, we are. We see we can monitor traffic between devices. Internally, we're looking at it more from the point of view of the asset being accessed, and EDR can provide some of that. I think where one thing that we forget about that's deployed on every Windows device is a firewall. And we've become too permissive on those firewalls over the years, which is why some of these worms were capable of kind of jumping around. And, so
you mean you're not turning off Windows Firewall on all the desktops?
We try not to turn off Windows Firewall anywhere, especially the desktops. The other thing that the one thing that we look at is that do desktops need to be able to talk to each other at all? And if you have an environment, unless you're like sharing printers or sharing shares from desktops to each other, is there a reason why any of those devices should be able to talk to each other? Can you create a policy that prevents that? And group policy, whether it's group policy or Intune, has a lot of capabilities for doing that. So for not allowing workstations from talking to each other. Workstations should probably only be talking to two things: your servers, printers, if you're doing direct printing, and the internet. It shouldn't be necessarily talking to other desktops. We had one kind of call a lab company environment where we had to break off their lab people. We ended up using ZTNA for that because the lab people could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be, they're just not going to be physically in the same VLAN, in the same office. They might be in another location. They might be outside the office, but we want to still make sure that we can get lab gear and the lab gear can talk back to them. So that's where we use something like a policy with the ZTNA that says, all right, if you're a lab user, it's now tied to the person. If you're a lab user, you're allowed to get to lab systems. ZTNA gives us a really good control over that, but we don't have that completely deployed.
Okay. All right. And I guess let me go back and from a beginner's point of view, for somebody that is dipping their toe in, just starting an MSP or an MSP that's starting to look at security in a much more precise way, where would be a good starting point in your mind with, kind of like a stepladder approach to zero trust?
I would say even take a step before that. Before you even think about whether zero trust is right for you, your clients, or what have you. Understand what you're protecting. We look at our three pillars: identity, device, and data. So what are you doing to protect each of these things? Do you have something in place? We think about the endpoint probably way too much, more than we need to. We have pretty good tooling at this point for the endpoint. The identity tooling has come up a lot, and we can do a lot with what's built into the tools that we use, whether it's G Suite or 365 or some other IDP like Okta or OneTrust or whatever. So there's a lot of ways that we can do that. Find your way and what the best way for you think you are for your clients and for your type of clients. And then data. Don't leave everything so wide open to everybody. Make sure that people have access to just the things that they need. And when they move to a different group, that they get that access gets removed. So you can get even more granular with that, especially with 365. There's abilities to do tagging of application types. You can even automate some of that. There's some newer AI tools around that, but let's put that aside. That's where I would start. Really identify those that, like, do I have something in place, and do I have a process in place to protect these three things? Then you can get down to the next level, which are looking at whether zero trust is. I mean, if I was, there's rarely, you need to have a good EDR in place. I think you have to start with that, partly because it's an insurance check mark too. If you look at the cybersecurity questionnaires, what do they ask? Or they ask about EDR. They ask about, do you have a password manager and MFA in place? Do they ask about security awareness training? You need to have all these things. So if you have all those things covered, then start looking at zero trust. Then start looking at something like a ThreatLocker or an escalation platform like AutoElevate or something like that. There's those. That's where where I think you would go. Some are easier than others to implement for sure. But ThreatLocker, for example, I don't know. I don't want this to turn into a ThreatLocker. I'm sure they didn't sponsor you or anything. I didn't see that in the opening credits.
Not this show, but they are.
But it's a they make it easy to work with from an MSP point of view.
All right, and I know I've pretty much tried to ask you questions, hopefully answering all of his stuff. But is there anything else that you think we should take into consideration about zero trust, and anything out of the 59 pages of the NIST document?
Look, I'm the poster child of shiny object syndrome. I love tools. And I love all the tools. I've tried all the tools. I have a reputation of being the tools guy. So that being said, security is not a tool. Security is a process. Security is a philosophy. Security is a way of mind. So if you're thinking about it at that point of view, think about that first. People, process, then technology, then look at the tool. That'll be my parting thought.
All right. I'm scribbling here, trying to make sure I get these down somewhere. All right. Raffi, thank you very much.
Sure.
Do you have any questions or anything else?
No, sir. All good.
All right. I'll be sure to let ThreatLocker know that you kept mentioning them. So to be good.
You can send my discount too. No.
All right. Well, folks, there you have it. A good look at zero trust and Landon. There is your first answer to your email, and I'll try to get some more perspectives for you and hopefully guide you guys in your zero trust journey. On behalf of my good friend Raffi and for everyone out there doing zero trust, I thank you for listening. If you found this interesting, be sure to head over to the website, find us in your favorite podcatcher, and subscribe. Share this with a friend. This is probably one of those episodes that you should share for people that want to up their security game and dig deeper into zero trust. And we'll have more on that in some upcoming episodes. And for now, that'll do it. Thank you all. Have a good night. We'll see you soon, and holla.